And now a story about writing a story. I'm Tonya Hall, and joining me is Dr. David Weinberger, senior researcher at Harvard's Berkman Klein Center, author of Everyday Chaos: Technology, Complexity, and How We're Thriving in a New World of Possibility. Welcome, Dr. Weinberger.
Hi, Tonya.
So while I was researching Everyday Chaos, I came across a very interesting blog post that you wrote titled Automating Our Hardest Things. It's fascinating story about teaching machines to autonomously compose essays and stories. Your story begins back in 1948. Fill us in on the history, including the iterative of refinement of the early algorithm.
So in 48, Claude Shannon, who is the father of information theory, information science, in the essay that set off the whole information science and computer age in many ways, he actually takes as an example an attempt to generate something like meaningful English sentences by noting what the frequency is of any letter being followed by any other. So a U following Q, it's quite probable, and X following a Q is very improbable. And then he started randomly generating sentences based upon those frequencies. And with some work, he came up with sentences that almost sound like reasonable sentences, but they're not. They don't make any sense. They sort of sound like they make sense, but still, it's an interesting approach. There was a later approach up through the 90s, and even still, in which if you wanted to either understand or translate or compose new sentences, the idea was, well, let's teach it the rules of the language, a bunch of the words and what the parts of speech are and how those parts of speech go together. And there are some basic rules that we follow, usually without knowing what they are explicitly. And if you do that, you can get closer to generating meaningful sentences or meaningful sounding sentences, and you can translate also, at least fairly well. And that's how we did it until this new type of machine learning came along, which over, let's say, the past 10 years, it's hard to put dates on some of these things, but over the past 10 years said, suppose we didn't try to teach the computer rules of language, but instead we just fed it lots and lots of examples of actual sentences. And when I say lots and lots of examples, and the work that my post is talking about, done by a group called OpenAI, they fed it 45 million Reddit posts and just said, note how the words go together, which words follow which. You don't know anything, you're a computer. You don't know anything at all about the words. We're not going to teach you anything at all about grammar. No rules of grammar either. We're just do a statistical analysis of which words are likely to follow from others, which words are near other words. And you do that and you end up with a gigantic statistical map of every word related to every word, how close it is in terms of where it shows up in sentences in these 45 million examples. And it turns out that approach, in which there is no sense of the meaning of the words, there's no sense of the rules of the language, there's just numbers, just statistics, enables you to do things like translate more accurately than systems that have some sense of how the language works and what the words mean, and also to generate what read like stories written by actual sensible human beings. It's really pretty mind-blowing.
You mentioned that modern AI was actually constructing, not copy-pasting. What do you mean by that?
So in the example, in the case I was looking at, it's they did this sort of analysis of these, in this case, 45 million documents, and then give the system a starter paragraph that they made up. And in the example, that's just it's a great example. It's been passed around a lot now. They give it a paragraph that reads like the beginning of a news report about scientists who have discovered a flock of unicorns, and these unicorns also happen to speak English. And you give it that, it's fiction, of course. You give it that, and the computer, thanks to the machine, what it's learned through machine learning, constructed paragraphs and paragraphs. They completed the story as if it were really a journalistic story. It's totally coherent. I mean, it's hard. There's some little giveaways, but mainly you really can't tell that it was composed by a computer. It just goes paragraph after paragraph, and it's nailing this fictitious story. It's not doing any copy and pasting. The text that you read in this computer constructed piece of writing does not show up anywhere else. It's not like it copied it out of this blog post or that Reddit post or whatever. It's all genuinely new material based upon the statistical analysis of a massive amount of existing and real material.
You also say that the developers are not releasing the full data sets or model weights. Why not?
Because this system is so good that if you wanted to use it to generate fake news for evil purposes, and it's hard to think what the non-evil purpose of fake news would be, you could, and it would be getting close to indistinguishable from actual human writing. And so there's a potential for mischief, let's say.
You also conclude that by saying nothing matters to machine learning. What does that mean? Explain that.
Machine learning is just it's result of intense statistical analysis of, in this case, the relationships of various strings of letters that we happen to call words. It doesn't know what any of the words mean. It doesn't care about what it's writing because it's just a machine. They gave it some sample text to begin, and then it filled out the rest of the story. But it doesn't care if it's a good story or a bad story or a true story or a false story. I mean, if it's a funny story or not. It's just a machine. And so it composes this thing without any meaning. Knowing what its meaning is, caring about what its meaning is, caring about what sort of thing it is. Just a machine.
Hence, right, the fake news angle. And I think in this era of fake news, this is an eye-opening blog post and certainly something we should all be thinking about. Thanks for kind of opening our eyes and making us aware. Dr. David Weinberger, senior researcher at Harvard's Berkman Klein Center. If somebody wants to get in touch with you and find out more about your work, how can they do that?
D. Weinberger at Twitter, one way.
All right. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you can do that right here or go to tonyahall.net. Thanks for watching.